Hello, this is Sharon Webb, Travel Tracker Implementation Specialist. Today I wanted to talk to you about the driver declined button. You may have seen the driver decline button when you're going into your trip request after the assignment has been made. Maybe you're changing the driver, or perhaps you're removing the driver from the assignment, and you may have seen the driver declined button. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what the driver decline button is, how it's different from the change driver or the remove driver. So when you are assigning your drivers to trips, you may be a district that will pay attention to how many hours that additional trip is adding to the driver's time, maybe by the week or by the whole school year. And if you are, then the driver declined button will be something perhaps that you'll be interested in if the hours matter. When a driver is assigned to a trip, the hours increase. When a driver is removed from a trip or changed, the hours decrease. And if you assign your drivers based on those hours, drivers that don't have as many hours maybe get preferential treatment before drivers that have more hours, then the hours matter. Well, the driver decline button uh, does not reduce the driver's hours. It continues to add those hours to the trip that they had been assigned to if they decline it. And so some districts will use the driver declined button instead of the change or the remove because they want to continue to view that driver as if they had gone on that trip, in a sense of dinging them because they declined the trip that they were assigned. So let me show you this. Maybe it would be easier to explain if you saw it in an example from the driver log. So as you can see here, I'm on my assignments tab, and I'm going to go into the driver log. It's going to open a new tab, and if you haven't looked at the driver log or explored this is probably a good chance for you to take a look at that. Let's expand Erin Andrews' activity, and I can give you some examples here using Erin. So the trip here that Erin declined, and so we can just see that from this trip number here, after we had assigned him, and he was increased his hours by 4.5, but notice no hours were changed. Now the next example we've got is that we have an example of Erin being removed from a trip, and it was a 3-hour trip, and so it reduced his hours back 3 hours, so it doesn't count against him, so to speak. This next, we removed him from the assignment, so the nothing went for that one, and it reduced his hours by 4 hours and 15 minutes. This is the when he was assigned. So he was assigned and then he was removed. So we see we increased his hours by 4 hours and 15 minutes, and then we reduced his hours by 4 hours and 15 minutes when he was removed from the trip. Now here's an example of where he was declined. He declined this trip. So this is trip 22801. Here's when he was assigned to it. It increased his hours by 4 hours and 15 minutes. When he declined it, it did not change his hours. So that's what the driver decline button does. It will not change the hours. It will not reduce the hours if they decline the trip. That's one reason to use the driver decline button if you are a district that pays attention to those hours and makes your assignments based on how many hours that driver has each week. And if you want drivers to remain at the bottom of the list, so to speak, because they've declined trips, then you would use the driver declined instead of the driver changed or removed. Now, let's go back into the travel tracker here. Now, there is another reason to use the driver declined button, even if you don't track those hours like that. You can use the driver declined button because it's going to give you a way to record why the driver is not taking that particular trip. Now, you can make comments, of course, when you change your driver, but the driver declined button will also allow you to make those changes. So let's talk about how do you use the driver decline button? How do you get to the driver decline button? Well, I think a great way to get to the driver declined button is from your assignments tab. Let's say, for example, that you have assign a driver to a trip and the driver is notified, and perhaps you have in your notification email a custom message that says contact transportation. If you were not available to take this trip, if you were declining this trip and they have notified you, well, that's a great way to find this driver is from your assignments tab because you have an option by driver. So I can click on by driver, and then I can use my drop down and choose the driver that has declined the trip. So let's say it was Norma, and maybe she is going to decline trip 22775, and so we can see very quickly, very easily, here's that trip that she's declining, and I'm going to simply click on the trip number, and that's going to open the assignment for me, the invoice, and I'm going to scroll down to the driver's section and notice that I have my driver decline button. Now, you do have the change button like you always have, and the override button, and the remove driver button, but here's your other option to driver declined. And if we click on the driver declined, it's going to make us give a reason why she declined this. Let's say maybe she had a doctor's appointment. Say okay. So now that driver is removed from this trip, and you can go ahead and reassign using your change button or your override button if you need to, and then maybe you're going to put Zach on this trip. We'll change that and add Zach on this trip. There's Zach now assigned. So let's take a look at the driver log now that we've done that. So let me scroll here and save and close. Now let's see what that did to Norma's driver log. So let me click back on the logs, and let's open up Norma. I have to click all here to see all of my drivers. And there is the trip 22775. Drivers declined, and notice you see the reason why. There was a doctor's appointment, but you also notice that it did not impact her hours. So that is a great use of the driver declined button, and you can see a little bit how those the differences is in the driver declined and the removed and the change button. So let's go back to our travel tracker. Remember, that opens a new tab. And let's take a look at our view by driver like we saw here. And there you can see that change has taken place where we assigned Zach to that particular trip. All right, and notice here that you can see a column of all of the different incidences where drivers have declined a trip. So that gives you a nice view as well of the driver declined. Now, of course, you can use your driver decline button in your trip request tab if you'd like to, just like you always have been. But I think maybe a nice tip would be to go right into the assignment and make that change there. So I hope that you were able to utilize that tip on the driver decline button. Thank you.